Hello, my name is Ron Bingham, and I'm your host of Science Chat. Science is a search for God. Today, we're going to talk about what prevented the scientific revolution from happening. What were the two barriers that prevented it from happening, and what role Christians played in eliminating those barriers? What was necessary for the start of the 17th century scientific revolution, and what role did Christians play in making it happen? There were two barriers to the scientific revolution: the reliance on authority to determine truth, and the use of Aristotle's deduction for the discovery of truth. So it's not the Pope who determines whether the Earth rotates around the sun or the sun rotates around the Earth. This is the realm of experimental science. The use of Aristotle's deduction for the discovery of truth. There are appropriate uses for Aristotle's deductive approach, but in fact, Einstein used some of Aristotle's deductions for his development of the special theory of relativity and the general theory of relativity. Okay, who was Aristotle anyway? He was lived in the 4th century BC. He was a Greek polymath, and he wrote on a variety of subjects: physics, chemistry, medicine, biology, sociology, geography. There probably wasn't a discipline that he didn't write something on. He was the teacher of Alexander the Great. He developed our modern system of formal logic, and he was wedded to the deductive method. Now, an example of how crazy this was is the Greeks would argue all day long about whether a potted plant gained weight as it grew. But it didn't occur to any of them to go out and weigh the thing at the beginning and at the end of the experiment to see if the weight of the potted plant increased over the period of the experiment. Everything had to be deduced from a set of obvious truths. That's the deductive method. It's very successful in mathematics. Euclid's geometry, for example. Euclid's Elements uses 5 postulates to develop all of the theorems of geometry, but it's not universal. He stifled progress in the natural sciences for nearly 2,000 years by holding deduction to be the way to discover truth. He also opposed the concept of the atom as the indivisible particle of matter. He still wanted to believe that everything was made of earth, wind, fire, and water. Francis Bacon, he was the father of the scientific method. He used an inductive approach, not too different from what we do today. You collect data, you form a hypothesis, and you test your hypothesis with more data. This is called the inductive method as opposed to the deductive. It's basically an experimental approach. You go out and you weigh the plant to see if the potted plant increases in weight. And it placed Aristotelian deductive methods in a proper context. You need both deductive and inductive searches for truth in science. So here is God speaking to Job when he asks, speaking about the earth, who fixed its dimensions? Certainly you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? So here God is using the inductive method to measure the earth. And what did Francis Bacon think about God in the Bible? God has, in fact, written 2 books, not just one. Of course, we're all familiar with the first book he wrote, namely Scripture, but he has written a second book called Creation. So Francis Bacon, father of the scientific method, was in fact a scientist, and he did